Welcome, everyone. I think we'll kick off. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Kate Gerritsen. I'm the Director of Communications and Engagement at Regional Arts Victoria. And it's really lovely to see our members here today. We also have a few other RAV staff joining, who you might see their images there. I'll just make mention of Nell Umsterdag, who, give us a wave now, there she is, is the person who's our membership engagement coordinator. And she's probably someone who most of you have. Here's Adam back. And most of you have some contact with and organises these sessions. So thank you very much, Nell, for your work on getting us all together today. I'll start by acknowledging that I'm on Wadawurrung country in Ballarat, and just pay my respects to elders here, past, present and emerging, and just acknowledge that we're all meeting on different countries today. So you might like to pop in the chat who you are and where you're coming in from today. And I want to acknowledge the elders on all of the countries and their continuous connection to country and cultural practice over many thousands of years on those lands that we're living and working on. I'll welcome our special guest today for our chat on insurance, Simone Slattery from GSA Insurance. Hi, Simone. Simone is the Senior Client Manager at GSA Insurance, and we've been really fortunate to have Simone working with us for the last 4 years on RAV's insurance program, and she's provided really great insight and has managed to get some policies working for our members here that really suit your practices and your organisations and the work that you're doing in your communities. So it's been really amazing. We've also got Claire Huang on the call today, also from GSA Insurance, and Claire is the person who speaks to clients from GSA. So if you ring up with a question, you're most likely to get Claire on the phone. And so thank you both for joining us. Just wanted to mention too that Regional Arts Victoria, when we've been working with GSA over these 4 years, we've managed to grab a whole lot of information about insurance and put together a few different articles on our insurance program. And we're going to pop a few links into the chat as we go through today's session. So you can refer back to those. There's one article that we published yesterday about the value of the insurance. So just trying to compare to some other products that you might find on the market and see the different kinds of prices. We've also got a bit of information on our insurance information page that really runs you through what all the policies cover. Simone's going to work through that with you all today as well. But if it's a bit overwhelming and you can't remember anything, you can always refer back to this page that I'm popping in the chat. So I will hand over now to Simone.
Thanks, Kate. So 4 years ago, we started our partnership with RAV, and it's been very successful to date. I think we have created with RAV really driving an expanded coverage set for organizational members, whether that be public liability coverage for your events, association liability coverage to cover you running the association and all of the things that come with that, or voluntary workers, ensuring that anyone that you have volunteering with you, if they're injured, has that sort of coverage there as well. So I suppose I'll start with public liability. When we created this program 4 years ago, we wanted to ensure that from the outset we were covering as much as humanly possible, and we weren't excluding things unnecessarily. Now we were looking at all types of insurance out there in the market, alternative providers in the art space as well, other associations that had products, and really trying to look for holes in those policies and plug them with the policy for Regional Arts Victoria members, sorry. So I do think we've created quite a well-rounded policy, but we're always open to changing it, upgrading it, molding it a little bit more, depending on the needs of the organization as well. So I'll start with the public liability. So this one it's there to cover your organization for, any injury or property damage to attendees, or third parties, I should say. Now, the public liability is covering third parties only. It's not covering your employees or any injury to them. If you're hosting an event, or you're organizing an open studios event, for instance, or an art installation in a public space, you need public liability, and the policy is going to cover you for anything you are deemed liable for. So given you are the host, you are organizing it, you are doing all of the legwork that is sort of surrounding it, engaging contractors, if you are, liaising with all other organizers and all the participants in it. Ultimately, while everyone should have their own public liability, you can still be found liable or named, as well as an individual being involved in it as well. So the policy that we have created is there for, dancers, if you're hosting a music festival, but I mean, there's parameters around that. If you are organizing a chorus performance, if you are putting on a play, if you are organizing film nights for your community, and things like that. Now, with events such as that, there are parameters that are in place, and I think one of the biggest questions we get and we have the most conversations about is around alcohol and intoxication, and what requirements you have as an organization to ensure that you're adequately covered, and you're trying to mitigate any potential risk exposure that you might have, or anything you can be found liable for. So while there's no hard and fast rule around security when you are serving alcohol to participants, or attendees at events, the insurer does have general parameters around that. They do want to know that the RSA is being implemented. You have security there. Now, we have in the past ensured that for smaller events, where they say, 150 people, maybe 200 people, the attendee age was a bit higher. It's not like your 18-year-olds that want to go out and drink excessively. And there isn't, events like that where it's a film night, for instance, and there's no security, you haven't engaged third party security, and really having that cost to outlay would negate you even putting on the event. We've got the insurer to work around that before. Essentially ensuring that everyone at the event has their RSA, and that there are adequate staff from the organization supervising as well. So that has been fine. That has alleviated the need to have external security providers sought and paid for and engaged for that event. That said, if that's for smaller types of events, if you have an event where you've got thousands of people attending at any one time, the insurer is not going to be as lenient with that. They're going to want to ensure that you have adequate security protocols in place. If with attendees, when you have thousands, there is a cap on the amount of attendees at an event that is placed on the current policy. That's 5,000 attendees at any one time. So if you have 5,000 attendees over a weekend, that's fine, or 6,000 attendees over a weekend, that's fine. As long as at any one point in time there is no more than 5,000 attendees, then the policy will respond to a claim. As I said, if at any one time it goes well over that, then the insurer's within their rights to either deny the claim, or based on you not providing correct information to them, or they could reduce what they pay out in the event of a claim because they have been prejudiced based on you not providing the information from the outset, or being upfront about the information. Misrepresentation is generally what they would call it. So the public liability is there to cover personal injury and property damage. As I said before, it's personal injury to third parties. It's not personal injury to your staff. The policy is never going to cover your staff for their injury. That if you're an organization, you probably need to have workers' compensation insurance, and that's where that would fall under that. And that's within every sort of state governing body that has that. It's not something we tend to get involved with, because while GSA does have a workers' comp division, it's costly and it's much more cost effective to go directly to your state bodies. The biggest thing to be conscious of with these policies is how they're written. And it also often gets sort of fall into the wayside. So they are occurrence based in nature. If you have an event and 3 months later you have a claim made against you, but in that 3 months your policy has renewed, the policy that was in time at the time of the event or the injury occurring is the one that picks up the claim. It's not the one that you have renewed. If you have gone with a different insurer, even if it's with the same insurer, they go back to the policy and the parameters that were in place and the limits that were in place at the time of the event. So it's different to association liability, which I'll talk through soon, in that it's the policy at the time that the injury occurred, regardless of whether you are notified of it a year down the track. It's not the policy in place at the time you are notified, which is what association liability is. I'll talk about that later. It's the policy in place at the time of the incident specifically. So public liability, it's there to cover obviously the injury or the damage to the property. If you are creating a public square art installation, or your organization is creating one, sorry, and you've engaged a whole bunch of other artists to sort of come in with it, and as part of that you're supervising the setup, or you're just generally organizing the whole event. If one of those installed pieces, whether it be a sculpture or a lighting display or an interactive one that the attendee can engage with, if that causes some sort of injury to a person that's attending the event, the policy is there to pick it up. If it causes damage to their property, for instance, it falls on them or on their car, for instance, if you have a big, tall thing, some sort of like sculptures by the sea type thing, when they're normally quite big, if that was to tip over in strong winds and smack bang right on top of someone's car, the policy is there to pick that up. That's property damage from your event, so something you would be liable for. While you're liable, there is also, the individual artist that may have installed that it falls on them as well. So it's where we need to be careful is where you are liable and where they are liable. And the insurer would look to sort of differentiate that. They wouldn't look to apportion all liability on you. They would look at proportionates and how that is sort of split. So when we created this, we tried to get it as much as possible. So community art projects, if you're curating, organizing exhibitions for your community, if you're even having retailing sort of for a whole bunch of artworks, artists, and you're organizing a market and everyone's sort of coming in to sell their wares or sell their bits and pieces, whatever they've sort of created. The policy is there to sort of cover things like that. We do say that when you are organizing these events, it is best practice, and it's also why we ask the question on the insurance renewal form of if you have contractors, or do they have their own public liability insurance. Now, we would deem these people to sort of be contractors because they are taking part in the event, but they are not your employee, for instance, or they're not part of your organization. So insurer would, if a claim was to arise from the act or the sale or whatever of one of the attendees at an event that you have organized, the insurer would say, do they have their own public liability insurance? Have you checked it with them? Do you have a copy of it? Have you been noted as an interested party? That's going to be their first sort of set of questions. It gives them the right to subrogate. So while they may pay what they believe you are liable for, if they don't believe that they should have actually paid all of that and the other policy from the other person involved in the event should have actually been found liable, that the insurer will then go back to that other person's policy and look to sort of pull back some of the money that they've paid. So that's called subrogation, but I mean, that's probably a little deep. It's probably not going to be overly common for this, but it is something to sort of that insurers do look at, which is why they ask the question about other.
Yeah, Simone, we've got a related question, I think. Catherine has asked, does that include food vans? So I think if someone's having a market, like an arts market, but there are some food vans involved.
Yeah.
So
anything that you are deemed liable for, if you haven't done your due diligence and you haven't made sure that the person attending in that van and sending out the food doesn't have adequate, safeguards in place for cross-contamination or allergies and things like that, or, food preparation, you can be held liable for it as the organizer of the event. So it's going to pick that up, but ultimate liability would fall on that food van and their insurance. But yeah, it has the ability to pick up your exposure around that. We know that there's like quite a wide ranging involvement in some of these events. So we wanted to make sure when constructing the policy from the outset that it was picking up as much as humanly possible. I just sort of lost my train of thought. Yes, sorry. At events such as these, if you do have multiple vendors that are sort of coming in, there are parameters around the policy. Obviously, one we touched on was attendee limits and attendee cap. So that's 5,000 at any one time. The other thing is if you do have fire or pyrotechnics or anything in that realm, it's not outright excluded. It kind of is, but we can get it approved by the insurer. But in order to do that, you need to ensure that you have appropriate safeguards in place. Now, that would be the person setting off the fireworks, for instance, is trained, fully qualified, it's safe. It's in a roped off area or something far away from all the other attendees, and all of those sort of like risk management protocols are sort of being adhered to. I don't think it's come up very often in that respect, but it has come up enough to warrant sort of mentioning that. Similar to, if you've got things like that, they want to know that you've got security in place as well. So security is not just relevant for where events are serving alcohol; it's relevant for crowd control. If you've got a lot of attendees. And it's relevant for where there's high risk things being done. Even if someone's there fire twirling, they want to make sure that you're following all relevant things to try and sort of liability. So it's a composite product. It's designed to cover not-for-profit organizations for managing that association and any claims that sort of might come out of that. So it will cover all your board members, committee members, employees, volunteers for their actions while they are working on behalf of the organization. So the policy in a nutshell, there's a few sort of key areas that it covers, one being directors and officers liability. So that's your committee members, your office holders or board members, if they are sued personally, or a claim is brought against them personally for decisions that they have made while they are acting on behalf of the organization. So that the policy has two elements to that. It's directors and officers for individual coverage to ensure that their personal assets are protected. It also covers the organisation itself, and that would be referred to in the policy as association liability rather than directors and officers, because that's for if the organisation itself is named in the claim and not a specific director. So that could be acts of mismanagement, defamation, discrimination, just a general breach of duty, financial mismanagement. It's quite wide ranging, but there has to be, an allegation similar to that. The most claimed upon section we are seeing now in any policy that contains this is employment practices liability. That's the biggest one, especially with all the psychosocial sort of claims that seem to be coming out at the moment and the ramifications off the back of that. So employment practices liability is allegations against the company or the director for unfair dismissal, harassment, bullying, discrimination, even things such as, I was looking to be employed by this company. I went through everything. I should have got the job. I turned down other jobs because I thought I was going to get this job, and then they have declined to be in the job. But now I'm out of money because I was adamant that I was going to get this job. Now it seems a little far-fetched, but that's actually covered under the policy. So it's any past, present or prospective employees or directors within the policy. The employment practices liability is booming at the moment. The claims that we're seeing are crazy. The volume of them and the type of claim. AI has gone a long way in pushing that through. People I think it has allowed people to be a little bit more confident that there was a problem and that they can bring a claim, but it's also causing legal costs to skyrocket because there's a lot of inaccurate information that's coming through, like a Claude or a ChatGPT. It might pull references from legislation in the US for an Australian-based EPL claim, and it's not relevant, or it's not a law that actually exists anymore, and it hasn't for 20 years. And it's referencing these things in these statement of claims. So lawyers are having to sort of comb through that and understand what it is they're actually. Now it's theft, essentially. It could be internal fraud by an employee or a committee member. That could be in collusion with a third party as well. So a third party is coming in, stealing money from the business with the help of the employee. So it's not just internal fraud, but it's external fraud and theft as well as that. Also, if you're an organization that happens to have that does a lot of events and you have a lot of stock that is generally provided or sold or given out at the event, and that is like stock theft, that would be covered under the policy as well. I actually have a client where they've got, one claim had 22 mil of loss due to theft. Is a large organization. It's a pet food company. But yeah, there was 7 different directors with 11 different types of fraud. So yeah, it's always that's a scary one. That's the biggest one I've had. You've got to make sure that when you do have situations like that, this is why insurers ask if you're double checking, if you have 2 people signing off any, transfers of large funds that you might be giving to vendors or suppliers or whatever, or you have, you do. Yeah, you have a lot of oh gosh, now I've just lost my train of thought again. Sorry. Pet food industry is wild. It is a lot. Yeah, if you're sort of doing stock take, those kinds of situations, reviews into that, and making sure you're keeping track of those things and doing them regularly, that's going to eliminate things, claims of that nature. I think that pet food one was slightly an anomaly, but yeah, that was a crazy one. But crime, I mean, if you're not on top of things like that, they can rack up. I had another one who I think it was about 1.6 mil in embezzlement from one of the directors there, and then they fled overseas. Said they got found out, said, "Oh, I'll pay back all the money." Paid 10 grand, and then left and never came back. So, and that was a much smaller business. I mean, it's a taxi company, but it's much smaller. So any sort of business can kind of be targeted anywhere you don't have thorough checks and balances in place. It's just something to sort of be mindful of. So association liability, it covers a lot, but it's not an expensive policy. It's a very cost-effective policy, and it's designed specifically for not-for-profits, to ensure that they have adequate protection to run those and to make sure the good work they're doing can be continued into the future, and they don't have to pay those large premiums that some other companies might have to pay. The other thing it does cover is professional indemnity, which I hadn't even mentioned. The professional indemnity, it's there to sort of cover if you're running training sessions for people, offering CPD points, if you are doing sort of advocacy work on behalf of the organization, it's covering things like that. It's probably one of the least claimed upon sections of the association liability, and the least remembered, which is probably why I nearly forgot it. But it is an important one. Let me just see. I had some claims examples for association liability. I'll see if there's any I didn't. Yeah, so here I've got an example for this, which might be sort of, you're able to sort of pinpoint where your exposure may be. So let's say an organization published a review accusing an artist of plagiarism, and then the artist sued for defamation. That's covered under the PI component of the association liability policy. So that artist, so PI or professional indemnity, sorry, it's financial losses. Everything is sort of leading to or connected to a financial loss, whether that be by the company for the crime section or by an external party for the PI section. There has to be some sort of financial loss, and if you've accused someone of plagiarism, that they feel they've been defamed or can prove that they have been defamed, then the policy is there to cover that. So these policies will cover your defense costs, compensation. The statutory liability as well will also cover any fines and penalties. So that's sort of the last piece that sort of fits in an association liability policy. It's fines and penalties handed down by regulators. If you've breached privacy law and you receive a fine, that's going to be claimed upon underneath that. Where statutory liability is a little bit of a difficult one is that it says it covers fines and penalties, but it's only covering fines and penalties that are allowed to be covered by law. There are some laws that refuse that say, you can't, this cannot be claimed on insurance. For instance, the biggest one that's in the media at the moment is the anti-money laundering and AUSTRAC, which is one of the regulators of this. Those fines cannot be insured under a statutory liability policy or any insurance. It's legally prohibited. So it will cover sort of situations like that. In New South Wales, not in Victoria, but New South Wales, it won't cover any breaches and fines handed down from work health and safety laws. Where it might sort of apply a little bit more to you is if pollution, if you're holding regular events and there's chemicals that you're using or that is being used as part of like a workshop or the events you're holding, and that's leaking into the ground and causing sort of damage there, you can have a fine and a penalty handed down from that. Actually had a client that had that situation. The fine wasn't huge, but there wasn't a great deal of damage that they had, but I think the fine was about $26,000. So it's still costly, especially for a not-for-profit organization. So as I said, employment practices liability is probably the biggest thing we see here. So allegations of bullying, sexual harassment, unfair dismissal, they're probably the biggest claims that we do sort of see. And yeah, it will cover the company for defense costs associated with that, as well as any sort of compensation that they are found to be liable for. So the policies are always tied to compensation due to a financial loss that has been determined and proven by the person making the claimant, and also the cost to defend the organization. Now, if you're unsure if it's going to be a claim, the biggest thing you can do is let us know, give us a call, and we can sort of talk you through it. These policies, or association liability, is very different to public liability in the way it's structured. We touched on that before, being public liability is occurrence-based. And so it's the policy that's in place at the time of the event or the injury that picks up the claim, regardless of whether you're notified 3 months later and you've got a new policy in place. Association liability is claims made. It's claims made and notified sometimes, is how they sort of describe it. So it means that the policy that's in place at the time that you are notified of a claim, regardless if that occurred 2 years prior, is the policy that's in place at the time that you are told about this, or you're told of the intent to bring a claim. That's the one that picks up the claim. So this is why it's so important to ensure that you have rolling cover if your organization is still active and operating, because the policy, even if you think, we've shut up shop, we're not working anymore, we haven't had a claim, we're fine, someone can come out of the woodwork up to 7 years later. I think 7 years is the statute of limitations to bring a claim, and they can bring a claim against you. If you don't have that, your directors and your staff are open. You are completely exposed. The way to alleviate that exposure would be to obtain a runoff policy. If your business has stopped, your organization has decided not to work anymore, you've done everything you need to do in the community, or you've merged with another one and sort of you've closed your doors, you can get a runoff policy. Now, runoff protects everything that you did prior to you shutting up shop. But you have up to 7 years of cover. So if you're notified of something within that 7 years after you have stopped operating, the runoff policy will pick that up. Now, runoff is, you do have to pay for it. It is it's unfortunately not a free section of the policy. The way it's generally done, you can get it for 1 year, you can get it for 3, 5, or 7. Some insurers will only do 18 months at a time, so you'll need to renew it each year. Generally, it's the cost of the premium, the standard premium of the policy that's been in place for the year prior. And then if you're going up to 7 years, it's about 300% or 3 times that initial premium. But it might seem like a big outlay, big cost from the outset, but that's actually, it means that your premium's gone down quite significantly, because that 3 times, you're only paying for 3 years basically, and you're getting 4 years free. But you do have to do that upfront. So it's for anything that occurred while you were operating that you haven't been made aware of, that gets brought to your attention after you have ceased operation of the business. So that's what runoff is. given these are sort of group policies, it'd be slightly different in terms of, pricing, cost for runoff. And it's something that Rav and I will sort of work on in the background, and we'll put out a little piece on it just so you're aware. Because it also comes into play if you're merging with an organization, another organization that is very closely aligned with what you do, and you sort of want to join forces to be bigger and badder and better. I think that will sort of assist. Then, unless that policy that the other organization has, if yours isn't going to be picking it up, you're not sort of the overarching sort of rule maker in it, then you need to ensure that either their policy is picking up your past exposures, or you have a runoff policy in place to pick up your past exposures. There's two ways it can be structured. We can help you with that if you have questions on it, but they're quite easy to from our perspective to cover off. So it's something that can definitely be done. The other one that we have, or the other policy I should say, sorry, that we have in place for organizational members is a voluntary workers cover. So if you use volunteers in any capacity, then it covers any injury to them for the services that they are performing while on behalf of your organization. So the coverage will includes like personal, permanent disability, temporary disability, death. Covers non-Medicare medical costs. It has weekly benefits for injuries that are incurred, and it also can cover domestic help if it's necessary. Recently, we actually had a situation where there was I can't remember the terminology, I'm sorry, but it wasn't a payment made to a volunteer, but it was some sort of kickback, basically, that they were provided. Nell, I think it was you and I talking about this one.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
I think it was an honorarium.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. An honorarium. So we spoke with the insurer about that, and they said that's fine. They've actually altered the policy wording and put a new endorsement on the policy to expand that coverage out to include honorariums as well. So yeah, that's fine. So volunteers, while they are normally unpaid, by definition, if you are providing an honorarium, then that's okay as well. The limit of age we increased from the standard, which I think is about 80 or 85. We increased that up to 90 years of age for each volunteer. Don't know how many people at 90 still want to volunteer, but it's good to see. I will be watching TV. But yeah, so voluntary workers, it's when we've honestly in the last 4 years, we have had one claim come out of voluntary workers, and I think it was about $500. Their volunteers probably tend to err on the side of like not making a claim against the company, but also maybe it's the safeguards in place when they are doing it as well. It's always going to help. So volunteer, let me just see if I have any claims examples for.
There's a question here, Simone. Isn't the volunteer insurance only payable if the association is found to be negligent or liable?
No, it's
for all activities they do, as long as they're working for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The organization doesn't have to be found liable for it. It just has to be that the volunteer was working at an event. That's not my experience. I don't know who your insurer was, but the volunteer that we had that had an injury was working at an event at the direction of the organization, the association, and that's what the claim was paid as a result of that. Maybe if you want, whoever had an issue in the past, if you want to give me a rundown, maybe send an email through with a rundown, and I can sort of look through, because maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, but I can give you some more information and sort of look into it a little bit more for you and see whether there is a differentiation in our policy compared to what they had in yours. There's always sort of an element of proof that the person was there working for your organization. But yeah,
so it's good to have some agreements in place and good to have some like records of who was there on what day and that kind of thing.
yeah, absolutely. It also covers the volunteers when they're driving or on their way to perform the services on behalf of your organization as well. So it's not just while they're there, but it's like sort of in transit or in travel on the way there as well. Um, I think there were a couple of questions that came up that I thought I would sort of go into a little bit that were sort of submitted prior to this. And one, the one that I thought would be quite beneficial to talk about, especially if you're running events where there's alcohol provided. It's a question about, is it worth getting liability insurance that excludes actions undertaken while someone is intoxicated, given that is common when damage occurs. It's a very common market position. Insurers are very aware that alcohol fuels claims, especially in hospitality venues. The what they're trying to do by saying that is they want to make sure that you're running a safe event. You have your RSA checks and balances in place. You're not adhering to or allowing people to sort of run rampant, run free, and get drunk and belligerent, and start fights, or you're creating a safe environment. Basically, this is why security sort of comes into play as well. Whether you have security to monitor the actions of these people when there is alcohol involved. I don't necessarily think you're going to find an insurer that doesn't have an intoxication right back into it or exclusion within it. It's in travel insurance policies. It's in all public liability policies. I haven't come across an insurer that will cover that. If they did, they would probably be out of business because they'd be covering so many claims, which is exactly why, probably leads me into another point, why abuse is not covered under the standard liability policy that we have for RAV members. Something we can help you with, especially if you have you're receiving grants from Victorian government and they require you to have betrayal of trust cover. We can help source that for you. It's not covered under the current public liability policy. And that's because of the amount of claims that come out of it. There have been insurers that have completely gone under. I think Catholic Church's insurance is one that is no longer around. There's a couple of others. Basically had no exclusions around abuse or allegations of abuse. And so we're paying out a lot of money and couldn't sustain their sort of insurance program anymore. So they just went out of business. So that's why insurers are extremely wary to provide that cover. There's only one other insurer that I know of that's sort of coming back and allowing and sort of advertising that they provide it, but that's in the aged care industry. And that's one insurer. Every other insurer pretty much excludes it at standard or will allow for a certain sublimit, say 250,000 of defense costs, legal defense costs for when the allegations are sort of made against you, but only up until you are found guilty or it leads into a criminal investigation. Once that shifts over, you have to repay those costs. So it's quite an uncommon inclusion. I have sort of noticed that there are a few association liability clients that we have had come to us who do have that cover included, but as I said, it's legal defense costs and it's from the outset, but as soon as it crosses into a criminal investigation or you're found guilty, you need to pay that back. So while the cover's there, it's not there if it's actually true. it's a hard one to sort of get. Now, we can source that policy for you if you do need it for government grants. We do it through one particular insurer called ANSVAR. ANSVAR only insure not-for-profits. The premiums are different to what you would get under the RAV public liability group policy. It will depend on whether the insurer will allow you to take the policy will depend on your revenue and what checks and balances you have in place. So child protection procedures, working with children checks, you need to fill out a whole range of questionnaires about it that they want to know as much information as possible. So if you don't have any formal policies and procedures around like working with underage individuals, they're probably going to say they don't feel that you're putting enough effort into mitigating potential risk, or you're not seeing it as a big enough exposure, and so they don't want to provide you the cover. That's not to say that you don't see it as an exposure and you aren't trying to mitigate those, but if you don't have those formal procedures in place, written and followed, then the insurer won't cover you. There's outside of this company ANSVAR, there's only one company I know of that will provide, say, a standalone betrayal of trust cover. The premium for that starts at 10,000, and that's for a very tiny company. So it's a lot. ANSVAR we can get a lot cheaper. I think the ones that we've placed have started from 1,500 to 2,000 and then have gone up to, up to 5,000 or 8,000, depending on the size of the organization. So it's the premium's not, it's a group policy. So you would no longer need the RAV public liability group policy. It would need to be moved out of that because you have to combine it with the public liability. So the public liability in that is not the driver of that premium. It's the betrayal of trust cover that they're providing. So that's why the premium is higher, because no one really wants to do it, but they'll do it for not-for-profit organizations because they do think that ultimately the work that's being done is lower risk, and there's probably a bit more care for the community in those types of organizations as well. So yeah, two things to sort of be mindful of. Betrayal of trust we can assist with. The intoxication we cannot. Another one that's sort of come up recently is members of an affiliate organization but not members of the organization. That is a weird one, because if it's an act of the main organization, or they're driving that initiative or that class or workshop or whatever it is, how do I word this? It's odd, because the cover is there, but it's only in sort of certain circumstances and special circumstances. If that, you don't need to be a subsidiary of the insured organization, but it needs to be an act of that organization, or a service of the organization specifically. So let's say you are Regional Arts Victoria, and then you have Regional Arts Victoria 2. Sorry for my lack of imagination there. You got RAV and RAV 2, and RAV is the overarching organization, and then RAV 2 does a certain service, does a certain workshop or something, and that's all they do, but it's off the back of the RAV connection. That's fine. You don't need to be a member of this one to get cover under for this one, because it's connected. But if it's not connected and it's just loosely they work together, then just because you're doing a program in connection with one of our insured organizations doesn't mean that your members are covered under this policy, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. It's a convoluted one, and it's a little bit hard to explain. Yeah. Are there any other questions? I'm getting tapped out here. It's not working.
I think Catherine has a question.
And there's one in the chat too after that, Simone.
Yep.
Thanks, Simone, for that. I've got two questions. So one event that we run is an event in the street. So we don't serve alcohol, but there is like a bottle shop in the street, and sometimes people go and get alcohol from that. We've never had any incident involving alcohol, but I'm just wondering how that would sit with the provider, the insurance provider.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one because there's not really any getting around that exclusion, but it's not sanctioned by yourself. As long as you're you have it being monitored, I think we can sort of ask the insurer what their stance on it would be. But I don't want to sort of speak out of turn here because there is a pretty concrete exclusion around alcohol there and any sort of injury to that individual if they are intoxicated. It's not going to negate your cover for other individuals that may injure themselves there if they're not intoxicated. It's just that particular individual. So yeah, so it's not a complete like blanket exclusion for everyone. It's just for them.
Right. Okay. My other question is around the definition of honorarium.
Yeah.
So we usually not employ, but we have a couple of high school kids come and help with an activity.
Yeah.
Would that come under honorarium if we gave them money to cover that?
Yeah, I think I can't remember. I'd need to sort of have a look. Like it depends on how much. If it's sort of like a token amount, it's not it's just to sort of cover any like out of pocket expense that they might have, like $150 or something like that.
Less than that.
yeah, that's fine.
Right.
That's completely fine. That's not going to be excluded. They'd still be covered under it.
Right.
But if you want to send me an email, just on the event and the liquor sort of being there, it's not sort of as I said, sanctioned by yourself. If you want to send me an email, I can speak to the insurer and just get some like full clarity around what they would do in that sort of situation if a claim did arise.
Yeah, because we don't employ security. We couldn't afford to employ security, but I mean, it's been going for 100 years. We've never had an incident. So
yeah, that's fine. And like I said, we had a situation very recently actually where it was a very small, I think about 150 or 130 people. It was a film night, and there was going to be alcohol provided, small amount. People, attendees averaging about 60 years old, no security, but alcohol provided, like a glass of wine or 2 glasses of wine, something like that. But there was going to be about 5 or 6 of the employees of the organization or volunteers of the organization watching, and they all had RSA. That was approved by the insurer. So that's fine. So there are situations where it's going to be okay. If you're, as I said before, if you're running an event where there's thousands of people sort of showing up at any one time, like 3,000 or 2,000 or something like that at any one point in time, and you don't have security and you know that there's potential for alcohol to be consumed, that liability could be sort of put on you for lack of supervision, lack of supervision, and so the insurer wouldn't necessarily look that favorably upon it. So we'd want to sort of speak to them about it in that instance. But there is the exclusion on there, but in certain situations they can be a bit pliable. But we always want to make sure we get written acceptance from them, not just sort of me verbally saying, yes, this is fine, this is not. We want the insurer to do it because that's where we're going to fall back on if we have a claim. We're going to say, you said this is covered, so you're paying it. So yeah, if you wanted to send me an email, I'm happy to push that one a little further for you and just get some additional clarity on it.
Thanks.
It's okay.
Matthew has a couple of questions too. Matthew, I'm just wondering if you want to jump on, if you're happy to take yourself off mute and jump on and ask. The one about alcohol might have already been covered, but
I think it might have done subsequently. It's just there was a fair bit of talk and conversation about having safe alcohol, RSA and all the rest of it events, and if you and that being a mitigating factor, but still certain matters regarding to alcohol consumption not being covered. And I was in my reading of the policy, the only matter to that relates to the people in the organisation, so the officers and the volunteers. So if they're intoxicated at any time, their actions are not covered by the policy. Is that correct?
I mean, it might sort of say that insurance policy wordings are slightly odd in that the way that they are read sometimes is not how they are applied. And we have had so many arguments with insurers over the years about it. So I'm sort of reading that, and that does sort of make sense. But every conversation I've had with the insurer that we have on here has basically said alcohol, you need to have these parameters in place. If you don't have them, you're excluded.
Fair enough.
So I'm happy to, I'm just trying to copy and paste your comments in there so I can sort of go to the insurer and be like, this came out of the webinar. Answer this, riddle me that.
Because that doesn't seem, to my reading of it, there doesn't seem to be more specific, any other specific mention of alcohol or similar matters and what requirements we would have in order to be covered or not covered under that.
Yeah, so I think in one of our FAQ, it's this is why insurance is a fickle world, because it tells you one thing and then the implication of it is quite different. The implementation of it, sorry, I should say, is quite different. So you have these parameters listed in the policy wording, but the insurer has provided separate ones for the policy wording to actually respond to a claim that you've made. So ours, for instance, has said if you have alcohol being served, you need to have security present, and RSA needs to be there. And we need to know about it to sort of approve it. If you don't do that and you haven't had that, then we're declining it. So they need first-hand knowledge and they need to provide written approval. There's always a bit of a manipulation of the policy wording that we can do. And yeah, as I said, it doesn't always read in the way it's applied. And the intention of our insurer is to not cover intoxicated individuals under the policy.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a tricky one. I know that it's kind of grey, and I'm not really giving any sort of like concrete information. That's the nature of public liability policies. They are slightly grey because every claim is dealt with upon its own merits. And if you have adhered to all of the things that the insurer has asked for, then you're generally going to be okay. If you haven't, they're going to pull on that, and they may decline the claim or they may just reduce what they're going to pay.
So I guess it's just a matter of I imagine that list of what they're asking for is in a separate document that somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's in the FAQ. Anyone from RAV, correct me if I'm wrong. If it's not, then we should probably update it, but I'm sure it references.
Yeah, we haven't. I just checked our little part about exclusions or what activities are not covered for public liability. Simone, we don't have mention there, but I'll type into the chat some other exclusions that we do have in there in case they're relevant to anyone on this call. But yeah, I think we could add some more detail around that if the insurer has that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely one that whenever we have phone calls come through or emails come through and people are having it seems to be at the forefront of people's minds, I think, or members' minds. So it's always something that we go through and that's happened quite recently. I think it was 2 weeks ago that I had that discussion for a particular event. So it's an ongoing thing, and it's things that we can get approved by insurers, but it may not be approved from the outset just looking at it.
It's just that virtually all our events are licensed, and we have nearly, majority of people are consuming alcohol, and it's all, we have all the appropriate state licenses, and we follow their requirements, and there's, everyone serving's got RSA, all that sort of bases are covered.
Yeah.
But yeah, just my reading of the insurance documents as provided doesn't mention that there's any special handling required of that, and if there is, well, that's something that we'd want more detail of.
Yeah, that's fine. I can put some stuff together with Rav, and we can provide you that sort of extra detail. I think what the insurer does is they look at it on a sort of general knowledge kind of thing as their core things, like RSA. If there's alcohol involved, RSA has to be there. If there are requirements by law that you have security for a certain amount of attendees, you need to be sort of adhering to that. So they do sort of leave, I know it sounds a little weird, they leave a bit of the onus on the insured organization to be following and mitigating their own risk rather than them having to spell out absolutely every little thing that you need to do. But I do understand that it does make putting in a claim slightly odd, because you're like, well, I didn't know that you had all these requirements for me, so I haven't adhered to all those requirements, and so are you going to decline my claim? I understand it can be quite a contentious sort of experience. So I think I'm really glad that you sort of brought it up, because I will put together some extra information and I'll get the insurer to say, this is what we need.
Thank you.
And that's at the bare minimum.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Was there something else too, Matthew, in the chat?
There is, but it's not especially important. It was just, I thought it was interesting that there was an exemption that basically suggests that if an organised crime organisation that has been listed by state or federal government takes any action, then you're also not covered. But that's probably relatively unlikely. But I can imagine there'd be others, plenty of situations where it might be an issue. But I'm happy not to talk about it. It's just just thought I'd mention it.
I can't even pinpoint where in the policy. I'll look at that. I've actually copy pasted both of your questions into a separate document because I want to look back over them. But that unwanted malicious act by a person. Yeah, I'm gonna have a look at that. Because I'm not quite sure what it's referring to just from the outset, but oftentimes there's a lot of words in an insurance policy wording, and you're just like, okay, and then that applies to that, but then we have to take that into account, so that, and then that applies too, and it's putting the pieces together. It's a big old puzzle. But anywho, I will come back to you on those. Maybe Rav, if you guys could share contact details, that'd be good.
Yes, yeah. I just typed into the chat before a link to our insurance page where you can read a little bit more, and there's Simone's contact details there. Sorry, that message I just typed in about the exclusions that are in the schedule for the public liability has gone across a few messages because it got a bit long. And one of those messages has come out yellow. So that's all. That's all in there.
Branding, always branding.
Yeah. Yeah. So Adam, just another question about the alcohol. So feel free to reach out to Simone about your specifics for your event as well.
Yeah. Okay.
I think Catherine has a question. You're on mute, Catherine.
Sorry. Question for Rav. Do you have things like model child safe policies and things that affiliated organisations can use as their own?
Yeah, if you have a look a little bit further up in the chat, and I'll post it again. Did post some stuff about the Trail of Trust. And that's the link there to our resource. It's locked down for members only, so you have to be logged into the website so that you can see that. And yeah, it just points you in the direction of a lot of resources that are online. We don't provide one ourselves in terms of a template because all organisations are so different, and that could open us up to some liability if we were to kind of advise on something where we're not a specialist lawyer.
PI.
Yeah. So we don't want to go outside of our scope. But that information that's there and the information that's online does give you a lot of ways to work through those policies for your organisation. So and if you ever wanted just a bit of guidance in terms of someone stepping you through, for example, the way that you might consult with other people in your organisation. We've done all that work for Region Arts Victoria, of course, so we can certainly, in a more informal way kind of help. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Is that all right?
Yep.
So I was the person that made the comment or asked the question about the volunteer workers insurance. I think I found the error of my ways. We had volunteer workers insurance a couple of years ago and got rid of it last year, I think, mainly because we'd never had anybody claim it. And then, of course, we had a claim,
Yes.
and so we went to our public liability insurance, which is all we had.
Mm-hmm.
And it was them that denied the claim because we weren't liable.
Right.
They fell over in a dance rehearsal. So that then begs the question, and at the risk of sounding mercenary, but in budgets and all that, why would we have volunteer workers insurance?
To pick up their injury. I think because volunteers
are
doing.
But if it's not our fault,
it's purely a benefit that you're providing them, and maybe an incentive to have volunteers work with you if they know that any injury that they do sustain, if they can't work as a result of that, that they still have a protection there. It is, I think, first and foremost, it is probably a benefit that you're providing. It's not necessarily for your organisation, although it could help to sort of bolster your volunteer numbers, but it really is just something for the volunteers themselves. I don't know if I've just cut out or not.
No, I can still hear you.
No?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. That's good.
That's right.
Any other final questions? We're kind of gone a little bit over. If there's anyone else who has anything to add.
I have sort of copied and pasted the questions that are in there, just so I can have a deeper look into them as well and provide a bit more of a comprehensive answer. Because sometimes it takes a little while to sort of be like, okay, what are you actually asking and things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thanks, Simone. And for everyone listening to the recording, just to know too that you are welcome to also reach out with questions if this session has raised any questions for you. So I think we'll wrap up and say a big thank you to Simone for doing all the talking today about this topic. And thank you so much to all of our members who have attended as well and asked the important questions for your organisations. The work that you do is super important to regional communities, and so your volunteer efforts and the work that you do on the ground to make creativity happen is, I'm sure, super appreciated. So thanks everyone, and please be in touch. We love to help our organisation members work through some of these tricky questions for you.